"Sir, please wait in the hallway." The private room was given to another patient with higher priority. The nurse's voice echoed through the crowded hospital lobby. It came out cold, without a hint of compassion. To her, the elderly man was just another number in the long line of patients. A few family members glanced sideways at the old man, who was holding tightly to a folder full of medical test results. The veteran didn't say a word. That private room had been the best option for a safe recovery after surgery. But he was feeling a bit weak, so he simply nodded and accepted the change. He straightened his tired posture and slowly walked over to a plastic chair by the wall. No one there could have imagined that, just a few minutes later, the hospital's routine would be interrupted by the arrival of a 4-star general, ready to make things right before a serious injustice took place. Let's dive into this story. Major Arthur Collins, 87, was born in a small town in Texas. The son of a military man, he grew up hearing stories of courage and sacrifice from his father, a World War II veteran. From the moment Arthur enlisted in the Army, he wasn't seeking glory. He believed service was a duty greater than himself. The Vietnam War left a lasting mark on him. Brutal battles taught him that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to keep moving forward even when every part of you wants to turn back. He was awarded the Silver Star, one of the nation's highest honors for valor in combat. But these days, Arthur lives a quiet, uneventful life, weighed down by illness. That morning, the envelope in his hands held the confirmation for a surgery, one fully covered by the Department of Veterans Affairs. He was supposed to be placed in a private room, reserved as a gesture of respect for his years of service. But the nurse on duty, Karen Doyle, didn't know that. To her, Arthur was just another elderly patient on a hectic day, one more number on the hospital chart. Room 212 was clearly printed on his admission papers, a private room with a comfortable bed and a wide window. It had been chosen specifically for patients needing several days to recover after surgery. Arthur was still waiting in the main hallway, seated in a stiff plastic chair. Nurse Karen Doyle approached him, this time accompanied by a younger hospital employee, Administrative Assistant Michael Harris. Michael's face showed discomfort, but Karen's tone remained cold and impersonal. "As I mentioned earlier," she said, "due to internal priority protocols, your room assignment has changed. You'll now be placed in room 318. It's not a private room, it's a shared ward." Arthur raised his eyebrows, but his voice stayed calm. "The paperwork I received clearly states room 212. It was issued by the Department of Veterans Affairs." "I understand, sir," Karen replied. "But we have to accommodate patients with special insurance coverage and higher hospital priority." Arthur looked around and noticed several family members quietly watching the scene. Some turned away when they met his gaze. "So, veterans come second to private insurance holders?" Karen hesitated. Michael lowered his head, visibly uncomfortable. "That's not what we're saying, sir. We're just following administrative protocols." Arthur took a deep breath, leaned on his cane, and gathered the folder with his medical documents. With slow, steady steps, he made his way toward the elevator. At 87 years old, he had faced enemy gunfire, flooded jungles, and sleepless nights in the trenches. But never, not once, had he felt as disrespected as he did in that hospital. Room 318 was at the end of a narrow hallway. Arthur walked in slowly, guided by Michael. The space had 4 beds, all occupied. One patient was snoring loudly, another was coughing non-stop. By the window, an old TV blared a noisy talk show that no one seemed to be watching. Michael tried to hide his discomfort. "Here's your bed, Mr. Collins." Arthur placed his folder on the small bedside table and slowly sat down on the thin mattress, which creaked under the weight of his frail body. His back, scarred from old surgeries, protested against the lack of support. Across the room, a young man leaned toward his mother and whispered, "They took him out of the good room, probably gave it to some private wing executive." Karen appeared at the door to check if everything was in order. She avoided looking Arthur in the eye. "Is everything all right in here, Mr. Collins?" Arthur looked up, his dignity intact. "Everything's fine, ma'am." She gave a quick nod and walked away. Arthur then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small case. He opened it and quietly looked at the Silver Star medal inside. He didn't carry it out of pride, but as a reminder that, once, his country had recognized his worth. But now, sitting on a cramped bed in a crowded hospital ward, he felt like a forgotten stranger in the very place that was supposed to care for him. 3 hallways down, in the inpatient wing, Lieutenant Mark Collins had just arrived at the hospital. He had managed to get a short leave from the Texas National Guard to be there for his grandfather's surgery. When he walked into room 318, he immediately noticed something was off. Arthur was sitting on a narrow bed, surrounded by unfamiliar patients. The admission papers clearly listed room 212. Grandpa? Mark stepped closer, confused. What happened to the room that was reserved? Arthur looked up and gave a tired smile. Change of plans, son. What do you mean, change of plans? They said it was necessary, hospital protocols. Mark looked around. He noticed how uncomfortable the other patients seemed, and the awkward posture of Michael, the administrative assistant still standing by the door, shuffling papers. It was clear to Mark that something had been pushed through unfairly. This is ridiculous, Mark said. Don't make a scene, son. I've been through worse. Mark took a deep breath, but the frustration on his face was unmistakable. No, Grandpa, this isn't right. He pulled his phone from his pocket. His fingers trembled slightly, more from controlled anger than nerves, as he searched through his contacts. Who are you calling? Arthur asked, curious. Someone who can fix this. The phone rang twice. Colonel Adams' office. This is Lieutenant Mark Collins, Texas National Guard. I need to speak with the colonel, urgently. The colonel is in a meeting. Can I take a message? Mark glanced at his grandfather, who sat silently watching him. Tell him it's about Major Arthur Collins. He'll want to take this call. There was a pause. Less than 30 seconds later, a deep voice came on the line. This is Colonel Adams. Did you say Major Arthur Collins? Yes, sir. He's my grandfather. On the other end of the line, Colonel Robert Adams's voice trembled with emotion. He had never forgotten the day a man named Arthur Collins led the rescue that saved his surrounded unit in Vietnam. Your grandfather is a hero, Lieutenant. What can I do for him? Mark quickly explained the situation. The denied room, the unfair reassignment, the silent humiliation in front of hospital staff and other patients. There was a long pause on the other end. I'll see what I can do. Don't go anywhere. The call ended. A few minutes later, Colonel Adams picked up another line and dialed directly to the office of the hospital director, Dr. Charles Whitmore, a respected physician known not only for his medical leadership but also for his strong sense of patriotism. Dr. Whitmore speaking. Charles, this is Colonel Adams. We've got a serious issue at your hospital. Adams laid out the entire situation in detail. When he finished, Dr. Whitmore didn't hesitate. Don't worry, I'll take care of it right now. Then the colonel made one more call. General Foster, I need you in Houston. It's about Arthur Collins. 15 minutes later in the hospital lobby, the sound echoed, boots striking the polished floor with authority. Patients and visitors turned to look. General Foster, leading a unit of 10 uniformed soldiers, entered with firm, deliberate steps. The sheer presence of the group changed the atmosphere instantly. Nurses froze. Doctors exchanged looks. Whispers spread quickly through the hallways. Nurse Karen Doyle nearly dropped her clipboard when she saw them approaching. The general stopped directly in front of her. Who's in charge of Major Arthur Collins's admission? I'm the supervisor of this wing, she replied. Which room is he in? 318, in the shared ward. The unit marched toward room 318. The sound of boots echoed down the corridor. Patients leaned out of doorways to watch. Some had already pulled out their phones to record the moment. Inside room 318, Arthur was still sitting on the narrow bed when the door swung open with purpose. General Foster entered first, flanked by 2 soldiers. The entire room went silent. Where is Major Arthur Collins? Arthur raised his hand, puzzled. That's me. The general stepped forward, face serious, and offered a formal salute. The soldiers followed in unison. Major, on behalf of the United States Armed Forces, I apologize for what happened today. Arthur blinked, surprised. That's not necessary, General. Yes, it is, Major. It's absolutely necessary. The General extended his arm. Please come with me. Arthur stood up slowly, leaning on his cane. The General escorted him down the hall to room 212. When the door opened, it revealed a spacious, quiet room. Bright, comfortable bed, private bathroom, a place of dignity. This is your room, Major. Where you always should have been. Arthur stepped in, eased onto the bed, and let out a quiet sigh of relief. Thank you, General. The General stood tall and replied, No, Major. It's the country that thanks you. The silence that settled over the hospital after the arrival of the military was unlike anything those halls had ever witnessed. Arthur shifted slightly in the bed of room 212. The soft mattress finally eased the pain in his back. Natural light poured in through the wide window, shining gently on the folder of medical tests resting on the side table. There was no triumph in his expression, no pride over the nurse's embarrassment, only the quiet dignity of someone who had, at last, been recognized. The first to step forward was a middle-aged doctor in a white lab coat. Mr. Collins, I want to thank you for your service. His voice was filled with respect. Soon, others followed. A young medical resident bowed her head in reverence. A younger nurse, one who had nothing to do with the earlier mistake, murmured words of gratitude. Even visitors and patient families standing in the hallway looked at him with admiration. Mark walked into the room and pulled a chair next to his grandfather. How are you feeling now, Grandpa? Arthur looked out the window. Outside, part of the military unit was still visible, preparing to depart. You know, Mark, for a moment I thought my country had forgotten me. He took a slow breath, then added, but now I know it hasn't. Just then, Karen Doyle appeared at the door. Hesitant, she clutched her clipboard against her chest. Her voice came out shaky. Mr. Collin, I'd like to apologize. I had no idea who you were. Arthur looked her straight in the eye, not harshly, but firmly. Miss, the problem wasn't that you didn't know who I was. The problem was that you didn't treat an elderly man with dignity, no matter who he was. Her face sank. The words hit her hard. She took a breath, clearly reflecting on her actions. You're right. I didn't treat you the way I should have. Arthur gave a slight nod. Then it was worth it. As the military unit left the hospital, the hallway erupted in spontaneous applause. It wasn't the kind of applause given to rank or medals. It was deeper than that. It was gratitude. Arthur closed his eyes for a moment, and for the first time that day, he finally felt at peace. A few hours later, Arthur was taken to the operating room. The medical team received him with quiet respect. The anesthesiologist carefully adjusted the equipment, while the younger nurse gently held his hand for a moment before sedation. Everything's going to be just fine, Mr. Collins, she said sincerely. The surgery went smoothly, without complications. When Arthur woke up back in room 212, the soft afternoon light was streaming in through the window. Mark was sitting beside him, holding his hand. It's all good, Grandpa, his grandson said with relief. Everything went perfectly. On the small table next to the bed, someone had quietly placed a small American flag and a handwritten card. Thank you for your service. Wishing you a full recovery. Dr. Charles Whitmore. Arthur rested his head back on the pillow and took a deep breath. There were no speeches, no standing ovations, just the quiet certainty that here in this hospital, he would never be forgotten again. In the hospital director's office, the desk was covered in nursing reports and notes from calls received throughout the day. Dr. Whitmore ran a hand through his graying hair, still trying to process everything that had happened. His assistant, Helena, walked in holding a tablet. Doctor, the video of the military unit's arrival is already going viral. Someone in the hallway recorded it. Over 300,000 views in less than 2 hours. Whitmore watched in silence. He saw General Foster enter the ward, salute Major Collins, and the stunned reactions from staff and patients. He let out a long sigh. "I want Karen Doyle and Michael Harris in my office tomorrow at 8 a.m. "Yes, sir. And call an emergency meeting with the entire administrative board today. We're implementing immediate protocol changes." The next morning, Karen showed up with her head down. Michael stood beside her, visibly nervous, clutching a folder full of reports. Whitmore didn't waste time. What happened yesterday must never happen again. Not in my hospital. Karen tried to explain, but he raised his hand. "I'm not looking for apologies right now. I'm looking for change, and it starts now." Karen Doyle was temporarily reassigned to the training department. There, she became responsible for leading courses on ethics and respectful patient care. She always began her first class with the same words. "A veteran taught me something that medical school didn't." Michael Harris, who had shown discomfort during the incident and later reported the full situation, was not disciplined. His transparency was praised as an example of professionalism. 2 weeks later, the hospital officially announced the Collins Protocol, a new care policy guaranteeing that veterans would be treated with dignity and respect across all departments. The official statement read, "We acknowledge that our freedom and values exist because of the sacrifice of the men and women who serve this nation. It is our duty to honor these veterans in every act of care." Within months, several other hospitals across the region adopted similar policies, all inspired by what had happened that day. And maybe the most important change that day wasn't the move from a shared room to a private one, but the shift that happened in thousands of small moments, inside and outside the hospital. Nurses treating patients with more respect, visitors speaking to staff with more patience, doctors listening to their patients, not as just another case, but as someone deeply loved by someone else. Because we don't care for people because they're special. They become special because we choose to care. If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and tell us how you believe those who gave so much in their lives should be treated. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story.